Hi, this is Rod Delo with Straight Talk about small business success. Today, I have Rich Levene, author of You're Doing It Wrong, Stop Managing and Start Leading, an expert in leadership and helping convert managers to leaders. Rich, thanks for coming on the show today.
Hey, Rod, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Um, I'm going to jump right in. You've published a bunch of books. You like whenever you put the words ops guru in a description. That's fascinating to me. I'm an operations guy by heart, so that warms my heart to hear that. Um, what what is dignity leadership? That's something you talk about quite a bit. Can you explain that to us?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what you just said, my operations background, and then the title of my book that's coming out this summer, You're Doing It Wrong. And as a manager, I was a manager. So my Hollywood story is I was that jerk that no one wanted to work for because I'd tell people, you're doing it wrong. You're not running the assembly line right. You're not, whatever it is you're doing, you're not building enough widgets. You're not selling enough. So I was looking and growing and trying to figure out there's got to be a better way to do this. How can I, for lack of a better term, how can I not make so people stressed out, mad, whatever it is? And I went off to school and worked on getting a master's in leadership. During my research, I discovered some work by Donna Hicks, who has a PhD from Harvard, I believe it is. And she had this definition of dignity. And I kind of scratched my head. And what she said is that there's one thing that everybody in the world wants and has in common, regardless of where you live, what you believe, is you just want respect. And she defined that as dignity. So that's when I started putting things together. And I'm like, you know what? If I would stop worrying so much about what I want and start helping people get what they want and show them some respect, let's see what happens. So I started building that in as I went through my master's program and working on my thesis, which is all about the difference between being a manager and a leader. So my whole story is I want to help people get out of that management zone. They're looking to get to the next level. They're trying to get their business performing at 100%. I believe that most businesses probably aren't performing at 100%. They might argue with me. I'm going to say, you know what? If you take a little different tactic at this, I bet you we can get you we can squeeze a little more juice out of the orange, if you will.
Mm-hmm. How would you how would you define a manager versus a leader?
It's a great question. For the longest time, we'll start with the beginning. I thought manager and leader were the same thing, and they're used interchangeably in the business world. Management is the easiest way is management is about things. You manage inventory, you manage a spreadsheet, you manage the production line, you lead people. So that is the biggest difference from me. If you're trying to get somebody to do something, you need to inspire them. There's only two ways to get people to do something, and it's either through inspiration or manipulation. Management is really manipulation. You're trying to get them to build the widgets to your specifications. Inspiration is sharing your vision, your goal with them, and letting them come up with the idea on how to make the best widget.
Okay. Really, okay. As a leader, as a manager, I'm a small business owner. And like I said, I was at one point, I was a plant manager. They even put it in the title. What do business owners need to do? How do they transition from being a manager to being a leader?
Well, one, I think you've got to be willing and open and ready to learn. You've got to be able to have self-awareness. It starts with you and what you are. If you already think you're the greatest manager on earth, and I was that person for a while, I let my ego get in the way. You're going to have to let go of your ego. You're going to have to be humble and realize that there's not one way to do something. There's more than one way. And all these other people are willing to help you if you just allow them to help you. And that brings in a lot of different pieces, from intrapersonal skills to interpersonal skills. And I like to start with the intrapersonal skills. What does it take to lead yourself? And if you're not willing to lead yourself, you really shouldn't be leading other people.
And, and this is something, I mean, and maybe this is, I'd love to get your thoughts on it. The difference between I mean, how do you, the level of trust? I think a lot of it, trust is a big piece of it. Can you explain how the factor of trust would really define between manager and leader?
Well, I think trust probably the biggest piece, and there's a ton of books out there. The five dysfunction of a team talks about trust. Simon Sinek talks about trust. I even wrote about trust in my book, and I have 3 keys that help you to build trust with a team. And in order to get there, it takes a lot of work. The 3 keys that I have is, number one, you've got to do what you say you're going to do. And you got to do that with empathy. So if you tell somebody to go build widgets, you need to be willing to go build those widgets with them and understand what they're doing. And that's going to open up the feedback loop. You have to be able to understand and listen to what people are going to tell you. The people on the front lines know way more than us as leaders. They're the ones dealing day in and day out. So they're giving you valuable information. The problem is feedback gets in our way and we hear things we don't like, which opens up a bunch of different chemicals coming out of your brain, puts you in a fight or flight, and now you get defensive and you get hyper focused on the wrong things. You don't want to do it. So those are 2 of them. And then 3 is you got to show up and be genuine. You got to be you. I've read a ton of books on leadership, and I even put it in my book. If you want to follow one book and copycat it, people are going to pick up on that. You're not being authentic. You're not following your style. So what I recommend to do is go learn as much as you possibly can about the art of leading, and then find the pieces that work for you and then reinterpret those to your personality and put them out there. So without being authentic, you're really not leading people. And the last thing I would say with trust is I think every organization knows what they do and they know how they do it, but do they really understand the why? Why are you doing this? And when you understand why, that's a belief, and trust is a belief. So if you can get to why, you can build trust. It's complicated, but it can be done.
That's outstanding, because if you don't have trust, you won't get that feedback. Your people have to have trust that their feedback will be taken and used, and not, well, like you said, that flight or flight doesn't kick in, because the second they get that, that feedback loop closes.
And trust was a real problem for me. So I took over a business unit before I went out and started my consulting on my own. And I started in beginning of Q4 of 2016, took over a business unit, and we did an all-employee survey. I can't remember when it was. It was either December of that year or the following January. So I had been in place 3 months. And then we do this all-employee survey. 6 months later, they get the results back from the consultants that says, my business unit that I was running lacked trust in the organization. I'm like, how can this be? So I went down that path of trying to figure out how to build trust. And it was complicated because I'd call the HR peeps. Hey, how do I build trust? I don't know. You just go do it. I called up the consultants. How do you build trust? It's on your report. I don't have it. I don't know. So that's what set me off on a venture to find out how to build trust. I realized just how critical it is. It was obviously missing before I got there. And then I was in the process of saying, okay, how do I rebuild this with my unit?
Okay. And this is one I'm going to dovetail off of that. What are the key questions a small business owner or an entrepreneur in general should ask themselves and others regarding leadership?
I think number one, they've got to ask themselves why they're doing it. And it needs to be a belief. I had this question asked of me, and it sent me probably in a downward spiral for a long time. And I remember it like yesterday. I was sitting in a group with a gentleman who became my mentor, and he asked our class that we were sitting there, and he said, "What are we in business to do?" And I mean, I remember saying, well, we're in business to help other people. And I kind of explained the business. He's like, no, that's not right. Well, he went around and it's like, wrong, wrong, wrong. And then finally somebody said, we're in business to make money. He's like, yes, you're in business to make money. And then that stuck in my head, and I was pretty young. So for the next 10, 15 years, I had this, we're in this to make money, 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 money. Well, that's not how the best companies run. They've got a belief. How do you get people to buy in? I mean, Southwest Airlines is a great example. They were started against all odds in 1970, 71. And their belief was that they could move people around the country at a low cost. That was their belief. They weren't in it to make money. So, and there's a lot of other companies that are like that. Patagonia is out there, and their belief is to help the environment. So they're they're selling camping stuff. You take somebody like General Motors, a great big company. You ask them what their why is, they don't know. They're in it to make a car. That's it. They don't get it, in my opinion. But I think if I'm going to go talk to a small business owner and coach them, say we need to get to why, because that's going to differentiate you from your competition. Because no one else is going to have the same belief that you are.
That was outstanding. Thank you.
It might have been a little long, but hey, we got there.
That I'd love to hear it. It's and that's the thing that gets lost sometimes is that money motive. Money is a byproduct of the passion. If you don't have the passion and you're only about money, there usually you'll sacrifice trust and other things, and it's hard to build. You become a manager. You start managing to the bottom line instead of building a passion. What skill would you say most leaders need to improve?
Listen. And I actually did some research on this one when I was working on my master's program. And I asked a lot of different people, all the way from C-suite people down to front lines. And I interviewed them, and I purposely left off one question. I did it intentionally. And I asked them all these different things. What does it take to be a good leader? And I was leading them, but I intentionally left off listen. And I went back and I said, okay, question number 6. I told you there's only going to be 5 questions. I'm really sorry. We're going to have a 6th question. What's the one thing we didn't talk about, or I ask you about, that you think is important in leadership? Every single person came back and said, I wish my boss, none of them used a leader. They all said, I wish my boss would listen to me. And when you shut down that listening, I mean, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? And it's not so you could talk twice as much as you listen. And the other thing is, I had a friend tell me this: silent, rearrange the letters, spells listen. It's powerful if we can just listen and take it in. And that goes back to that feedback. And then you're getting information. And what usually happens is, when you're listening, people are preparing their answers. They're not listening to try to solve a problem or to understand. They start talking. It's like, aha, I've got a memory that I remember. So I'm going to fill in the dead space with this next thought process. In people's brains, you've got to rewire your brain when it comes to listening. And it's not an easy task.
Okay. I'm trying to, in that, if I had to ask, what are some words of wisdom that you would pass on to a leader? I mean, I think I've asked this. I'm going to ask the same question 2 or 3 different ways.
No, it's all good.
Yeah. I'd love to. What would you say is your words of wisdom to a business leader?
Number one, I think you've got to be authentic, and that's a hard thing to do. Humans show up, we show up in 2 different worlds. We've got what I call the front stage world, and then the backstage world, or you can call it your at work world or your at home world. When we're at home, you start doing things differently because you're relaxed and you're around people you know. When we go to work, whether that be over a Zoom call virtually, or it's in an office space, or it's a construction site, or who knows what it is, but whatever work is to you, people show up as being something that they believe that another person wants them to be. I'm going to do this job. And there's a stereotype. Accountants have a stereotype. Doctors have a stereotype. Lawyers have a stereotype. What happens if you just show up as you and be you? And one of a person that a lot of people probably don't know that was a lawyer, became a great leader, was the former CEO of Southwest Airlines. He started out as a lawyer before he passed away. He was a lawyer, and then he became the leader and CEO of Southwest Airlines. But he was charismatic. He was himself. He was gregarious. He's had all these different things. You would have never thought he was a lawyer. So he broke that mold. He was genuine. He was himself. And I think that's the biggest thing is and that comes back to self-awareness. You need to understand your behaviors, what actions you do that may or may not inspire somebody else. So some of your actions may do just the opposite of inspiration. And then you got to understand your core beliefs and what motivates you, because not everybody is motivated by the same thing. And then you also need to understand that in other people. And once you start understanding what motivates and inspires other people, then you can really lead them because you're aware of yourself and your actions, and you're helping them become aware of theirs.
Okay. That's
It's a
some
mouthful.
pretty good wisdom. That's some good wisdom.
Well, it comes from that wisdom comes from 20 to 25 years of making a lot of mistakes. And learning from the things I did wrong. And I've probably learned more things in life from failure than I have from success. And to be honest with you, I don't like the word failure. I don't believe I've ever failed. I've just had a lot of times where things didn't go my way and I had to go back and regroup, which also kind of ties in to my why statement, which is to learn, to grow, and to lead. So number one, you got to learn. So leaders, you got to be willing to learn. And then once you start learning, you can start growing. And then to lead, you need to go out and you need to do those actions. Well, when you start acting, you're going to make mistakes. As a leader, we all make mistakes. Okay, own that mistake. That's the authenticity. You're going to learn from it. So it puts you right back through the cycle again. So I believe leadership is this slow mastery of learning, growing, leading, and it just keeps going through and through and through.
And I think the old saying, what wisdom comes with scars. So
Yes.
So yeah, if you've never failed, you've never really tried to do anything.
Well, I've got a lot of scars then. I'm pretty scarred up.
You and me both. If what was the one question I should have asked you that I didn't?
Oh, wow. Dang, I've never had anybody ask me this. Probably what motivates me would probably be the one, which would get into my core beliefs. I just want to help people be successful. And, I've had people tell me, they're like, hey, Rich, you want to create this world of dignity. And they've told me it's never going to happen. You know what? It's going to happen. Just might not happen in my lifetime. I'm going to be a catalyst for it. And if I help one person today and that person goes out and helps a person, now we're up to 3. Now, if all 3 of us go and help somebody tomorrow, we're at 6. And then that just continues to go on. Eventually, we're going to get to the billions of people. It's just going to take us a really long time. It's like trying to eat the elephant or eat the entire pizza. You can't do it in one bite. You've got to take small chunks and work at it. And it's, I'm going to tell you right now, leadership is not a cakewalk. It's not easy. It takes a lot of work, a lot of discipline, a lot of focus. And there's some days that you're just like, you want to put your hands in your face and say, oh my, what did I get myself into? But then you got to ground yourself and go back and say, okay, I'll go back to my why statement. Why am I doing this? And that's to help other people.
As long as you have that, I think you need that touchstone, that you got to come back and be able to touch home base every so often. I think to ground yourself.
Yeah. And one of the habits I picked up that helped, that I didn't even start until I went to my master's program. And I started my master's program late. So I was working for 20 plus years before I ever go, wait a second, I don't know everything. I need to go do something. But I started to journal. And I would do this every day. At the end of the day, I got a reminder set up on my phone that says, hey, you need to write down your journal. Now, here's one of the keys. I used to be a negative thinker. I grew up in a lot of structure where everything was no, or follow the rules. So it's like, how do you break out of that negativity? How do you become positive? So every night at the end of the day, I write down in my journal, it's basically an attitude of gratitude journal. What happened today that was great, that was significant? So I always write down, what is your mood? I always put down, it's awesome, or it's rad, it's better than great, whatever it is. And then I reflect back and say, what good happened? And I write it down. I force myself to find something. So it does a couple of things for me. The next day when I get up, I'm focused to say, okay, I got to go make something good happen. So I don't have to think so hard tonight at the end of the day. And it gets me in that right mode. But then when I do hit roadblocks, I'm human. I've made mistakes. I forgot to write in my journal for a week because I get too busy. But when I go back and read my journal and reflect back on where I was at, I look at all the cool things I've done and where I've been. I'm like, wow, now I'm re-inspired. So I'd say that's one habit. And I remember talking with my professor about this. I'm like, I'm an old man. I don't need a journal. I already got this stuff down. I'm too cool for this. I'm too cool for school. And he's like, no, you need a journal. And as a matter of fact, I had a conversation with him earlier today, and we have made strides. It's amazing how far I've come and grown as an individual just by writing down my gratitude every day.
Thank you. That was an excellent. I can't think of a better way to really bring this to a final. But if someone wants to, and with all the knowledge you've imparted, if our listeners want to reach out or find you, how do we do that?
You're going to go to dignity-leadership.com on the World Wide Web, and then you can get anything you want there. I've got a place where you can sign up to get a newsletter. You can find all my social media, all my podcasts are all listed all on that one website. So it's dignity-leadership.com.
If they want to obtain your book, where's that? Is that also through the website, or can they get that?
So the book's not quite out yet. I'm still fighting with the editors to get through the last round of editing, and it's going to be out. We're shooting for a June publication date. And as soon as that's out, the link will be available on my website.
Excellent. Thank you for taking the time today. I really enjoyed talking to you, Rich. I think our viewers will like hearing from you as well.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm grateful that you invited me to join your show today.
Thank you.
All right.